Welcome to the shop, and we have a lot of information to cover today, so I'm just going to get started right into it. First of all, we have doped everything on the model. It is all ready for paint. And so today we're going to talk about the paint scheme that I have chosen for this. Why? Kind of not important to you guys. There are factors behind this. It's a fun scheme for me. We'll get into it, but I need to cover some last few things to wrap up the doping. Let's turn you around and I'll talk to you about that. So as you can see, the wing is fully covered now, both top and on the bottom, and I've got the servo plates installed. I'm using the panhead screws, number 2, 3/8 inch long panhead screws from Dubro for these. It's a good option for me. I prefer those over the servo screws because the panhead, it makes it a little bit more slipstreamed, a little bit more finished, and good quality screws means they're magnetic. So if you lose one in the grass, you can pick it up with a magnet. I've got a big strong one that I sweep across the grass whenever I lose screws. It happens. But you can also use magnetic trays for when you're servicing your airplanes at the field. But with the dope that I used is actually aircraft finish, non-tautening butyrate dope. So tautening. Tautening is pretty self-explanatory. It's not exactly a word that we frequently use in the English language anymore. Taut means to make tight. So tautening, there are different types of dopes that do tautening. There's nitrate and butyrate dopes. And with butyrate, you can formulate it in such a way that it doesn't tauten. It doesn't get tight. It doesn't pull the strands tight. So essentially what you're talking about is shrinking or non-shrinking dope. All right. And so this particular brand that I use, I got from Aircraft Spruce. And you can pick it up. It's pretty inexpensive. It ships to you. Picked up, I think this is a quart. Yeah, quart, 0.95 liters. There you go. This is A1690 clear butyrate. So Randall Aircraft Products is what it is. It works really great. What can I say? Now, I did apply it with a brush. The brush. Which brush did I apply it with? Where is it? Where did that brush go? Ah, there it is. Found it. This one. Got this from Walmart. Pack of many. And it's... So with the dope, I brushed it on. I found that batches of no more than a total of 50 milliliters. English, not scientist, Joshua. Okay, so 50 milliliters, that means 25 milliliters of dope and 25 millimeters or milliliters of acetone. Reason being is that the acetone evaporates. Acetone evaporates very easily at room temperature. And with all of the volatiles that are in the butyrate, it kind of accelerates that. So I found that batches any larger than that, by the time you get to the bottom of it, it's kind of evaporated enough where the consistency is different. So that's my recommendation there. Keep in mind that your first layer or your first application of dope, it's like a sponge. It just sucks all of it in. So you have to lay it on kind of thick. You'll learn about this as you try this technique for the first time. But the balsa and underneath and even the coverall itself, it just sucks all of it in really, really well on the first coat. So subsequent coats, not nearly as bad, but something to keep in mind as well. So since I'm using SIG coverall, I didn't need tautening dope because you can shrink the covering using a covering iron or a heat gun, as I've mentioned previously when talking about it. So there's no need to use the tautening type, okay? There may be other covering techniques, other covering fabrics that you may need to use the tautening for, so make sure you keep that in mind when you're ordering. But this stuff works pretty dang nice. So, what's next? Well, let's go talk about the paint scheme. Here it is. So this particular scheme I chose because I'm from the state of Maryland. I love the state of Maryland, and I love the Maryland flag. This is an homage. Just absolutely love this. This was drawn up by my good friend Steve Niezgoda at 13th Squadron, amazing designer and friend, and he really did such a bang up job. And Old School Model Works provided these templates on their website so that you can make rough sketches and see what you want to do. But Steve was able to do everything digitally, which makes things really nice for me. I will also mention that this was actually the second iteration. Here you can see the first iteration that he did. This was way too elaborate for me to do for this model. I could do it, and if I was super enthusiastic about sport planes, yes, this would be the scheme I absolutely would do, but it's far more intricate than I was willing to put on my model for the intended learning purposes that it was primarily for. Now, with the paint scheme in mind, there are a couple of principles of paint application that I always abide by. And usually it comes down to, first and foremost, a decision of which direction you're going to paint. And by direction, I mean light to dark or dark to light. Sometimes it is beneficial to work dark to light because working in layers allows undertones to bleed through top layers. So for example, if you have a blue, but you want it to be kind of dirty and really more weathered and worn, it might be, rather than have a white base coat, it might be better to have a gray base coat. So those are the kind of decisions that you need to make. For this, it's all light to dark. So we're starting with a light base coat. We're starting with white because that's the background. It's the lightest color that we're working with. And so that just makes everything easy. So you spray the white where the white needs to be. So for example, on the fuselage, it's all red. So I don't necessarily have to spray white there because it's all just going to get red. And I don't necessarily have to have the white underneath because the coverall is already white. Now you can do this to sort of blend things in if you have patterns or textures that sort of need to be blended together. But I don't think it's that bad on this plane, and you can do multiple coats to try to cover some of that up. And since you're going to do multiple coats anyway, I may as well do it with the red. The second thing that I think is really critical that people try to do but don't always nail is masking. Let's talk about tools for masking. With masking, you have to have something that's going to block your paint really, really well. And I find that these rolls of essentially packing paper, sometimes they call it masking paper, but you can get just these massive rolls of brown paper at the hardware store. And it's in your paper or painting aisles, and it works exceptionally, exceptionally well. You can unroll it and just rip a piece of it and then cut with scissors away, cut things away that you don't need. With masking, if you have a fine line that you need to mask it with a proper masking tape, and then anything after that you can mask with just any kind of tape, and then make that go over top of the masking tape, but not the surface of the plane itself. Additional things you want are cutting instruments. Sometimes you need to make little cuts or slits. You can use a knife. I prefer to use a knife sometimes, but regular scissors work too. Dubro also has these amazing trim scissors. They're primarily made for cutting plastic canopies, but they're really good for getting into tight spots and making little tiny snips too. So there's that. They're also not handy in my drawer, but there are offsets. Oh, there they are. They're right back there, right there. So there's a little bend in the blade, and sometimes that's helpful for getting into tight corners. So you also want a pencil. Sometimes you need to make reference marks and for where you're going to lay your masking tape. So I prefer a pencil because a pencil can be erased a little bit depending on the surface, but it works pretty well on the SIG coverall too. And then that's pretty much it. There are other things that you can use as well. Some people prefer some tapes over others. For me and what I do, for the most part, the Scotch or 3M, just boring stuff, it works for me. I think the biggest issue that people have when they're doing masking is they assume that they're just going to blow their color all in one shot, one layer. That's just not how good paint works. If you want a good, crisp, clean line, you will never do one coat. It's always multiple light passes of paint, especially yellow. Yellow is particularly persnickety. You'll never get a good single shot with yellow. It usually takes me at least 3 passes of yellow to get a good, consistent yellow. And we're using yellow on this. Let me give you a big fat for instance. So what you're seeing here is the start of the tail. The Maryland flag consists of the 2 different fields, the 2 different family crests. So we'll have the red cross and then the yellow and gold checker pattern here. They always oppose each other. So this side needs to have the checker pattern, this side needs to have the cross, and vice versa for this side. So I will put a cross here along with a checker pattern. And the cross always goes on the right, okay? On the bottom of the flag. Okay, so this is the tail, so this is going to be the bottom of the Maryland flag. And then on the main wings, we'll do, so this is the top of the wing, and this is the leading edge here. So we've got the cross that will go here. Therefore, on the left side, the checker pattern will go here, and the cross will go here. All right? That is the plan of attack. And then on the bottom, it's also reversed as well. Let's talk about that. So again, looking at the bottom, this is the rear. You're going to have the cross and the checker pattern. So on the wing, it will correspond to that as well. Cool. Clear as mud. But what we can see is that everything is masked off like crazy here on the rear because we're shooting lots and lots of yellow. This is 3 very light mist coats of yellow. There's a little bit of overspray here. There's been some challenging spots to get here, but there's a nice seam that runs around here after I already shot white all over all of this because I wanted to make sure that I have a nice even background for yellow because everything shows through yellow. So making sure that you have a nice base for yellow is really, really important. From here, we are going to go into further masking. Let me show you that. All right, so you're looking at a program that I use for cutting vinyl. I have a silhouette, and this is a custom DXF file that was generated based off of the pattern that Steve sent me. So being able to pull that, we use Adobe Illustrator. My wife's a graphic designer, so we have Illustrator, but you can use other vector-based programs like Inkscape. So there's Inkscape down here. That's what that looks like. But you pull up the DXF, and this is like an overage of that field. And then what I can do is take a measurement on the plane of how wide this field is, and then scale it accordingly, and then cut it out on the silhouette. All right, so with the sheets all cut out, we're just putting on this transfer sticky stuff, and I put a little letter B for each one of the sections that's going to be black, and then I peel it up. In reality, before you apply the transfer film, you can pull those up, and I think in the professional world they're called warts, but yeah, that's the area that needs to be black, and that's why I labeled it B. So then once you transfer it to the plane, you got to make sure everything's lined up right. Sometimes you have to pull it back up. Just be gentle. And if I'm perfectly honest, if you noticed those B's were upside down, yeah, I put this on 180 degrees out of rotation. So this is wrong per the flag. That's why I say, like, you can screw this up. It's kind of embarrassing because it actually happened twice. So yeah, painting on the third application here, light mist coat, light mist coat. This paint is an enamel and it dries in 15 minutes. So a couple of really light coats, wait 5 minutes, and then do a final coat, and then let it all fully cure out for about half an hour. Let's pull off the masking a little bit and reveal how cool this is. A little frustrating. As I mentioned, I have had to redo some things because your brain gets a little crossed sometimes. So that's why I wanted to go this route, cutting my own masks, because I've tried doing this thing before, way long time ago, for the Maryland flag, and it does this to you. It sort of plays tricks on your brain because of the alternating patterns. Anyway, I really want to show you this. This looks sick. Oh, I am ecstatic about it. The paint is still kind of wet, so that's why I'm not really touching it. On the tail, I've got to imagine there's a horizontal line here and here. I need to remove that still, but I tried to remove my main masking when the paint is still just a touch wet. That way it doesn't lift and rip the paint off of the surface behind it. So I'm going to try to get to these real quick, but it just, oh my goodness. It's perfection. It looks so good. Anyway. It's going to look great when it's done. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish this. I have a lot of masking yet to do on the fuselage, so I need to do the same thing with the crosses, and then mask the whole tail off and shoot red all over the fuselage. The wing, need to assemble the ailerons, need to put those on, shoot white over the whole thing, and then put those stripes and the panels on. So lots more to do. It's going to take me a couple of weeks to do that, but I'll give you some updates and some updates on other projects. So thanks so much for following along today, and hope you learned something. Hope you get excited about trying to paint, not only paint, but try to paint on this coverall with dope. It's been a really fun journey. I'm really liking the results of this. So one more technique to keep in my toolbox. And I hope you guys are following along at Dubro, on the Dubro Pine Ridge YouTube channel, as well as on Facebook for our masterclass. Had a first one and it was super fun, super fun. So we're going to be working on that Midwest Texan, and it's going to be a lot of fun to do some of that stuff. So head on over to Dubro.com, use code Josh10 at checkout, get yourself a little 10% discount, and let's seriously dig in and start working on those flying works of art.